You're about to listen to an excerpt of Secret City Geek Lab, Orange County's best in geek news and pop culture features, broadcasting live every Sunday at 3 p.m. on 89.5 FM in Anaheim or online at ktstfmanaheim.com.
So, welcome to our audience here in New York. Welcome to our audience in Los Angeles. And to everyone watching this live stream on Yahoo, welcome to you at home as well. From the Directors Guild of America Theater here in New York, my name is Eugene Hernandez, as I said, from the Film Society of Lincoln Center. Please join me in welcoming the cast and crew from Into the Woods.
Not sitting yet. Now we're sitting. The ladies are sat. Oh, man, that's good.
There's one person who's missing from this stage, but he won't be missing for long because he sent a note.
Yes, Steve Sondheim sent a note. He said, I'm sorry not to be there with all of you to celebrate Into the Woods, but I've been laid low by a virus. However, James Lapine, my good friend and collaborator for 30 years, with whom I wrote the show, is present to help convey the pride we feel in the movie that the Disney studio has made of it. Stage and screen are such a totally different medium. The Disney film of Into the Woods is a happy exception, partly because so many of the cast come from the stage, this is true, and understand the differences between the two mediums, and partly because Rob Marshall, the director, is an accomplished and imaginative practitioner of both. Another reason, I have to add blushingly, is that James and I were closely involved in the making of the movie all along the way, from conception to refinement. It was an exhilarating and exciting experience, which I think is reflected in the final result. I hope you'll agree. That's from Steve.
Take a moment and tell us from your vantage point as the co-creator of what we've just seen, the originator, why do you feel that Into the Woods remains so resonant to audiences today? What do you think it is about it that connects with people today?
First of all, fairy tales have been around for a while and will continue to be so. And I think it's funny how, I won't bore you with all the details how we came up with this notion, but I remember I was about to be a father, and my wife was expecting, and I was a little nervous, to say the least, and we had just sort of hit on this idea, and I remember I was working on a show, and I was in the theater with a designer who had a little 2-year-old who she was trying to feed, and the kid was like throwing Cheerios and food all over the place, and I'm going, oh my God, this is what I have to look forward to. And I said, are you going to teach your daughter table manners, And she turned to me and she said, James, all I hope to do in life is teach my daughter the difference between right and wrong. And it was such a resonant little moment that it kind of fed our whole sort of thematic propulsion with the writing of the show. And I think I don't think we would have guessed it would continue to be this popular, but I think it just resonates because people are always having children, and our children are growing up, and we're leaving them a world that often, more times than not, worries us a lot. And we own that, Once we get older, we have to look back and go, we're on the other side now. Can't blame our parents. Our kids are blaming us. So that was kind of the sort of thematic germ of it all.
I was wondering if you could talk about the process of deciding which songs to cut and how you made those choices and how painful was it?
Rob and I worked really hard to capture the essence of the show without ever being literal to it. And I think we both had to come down to the hard choices, what should stay and what shouldn't, and Stephen Sondheim couldn't have been more supportive of the decisions.
Could you please talk about the idea of what a fairy tale means to you, and maybe explain this sort of relevance, importance today as you see it?
I do feel this is very much a fairy tale for the post 9/11 generation. I have to say, and I don't think I ever shared this with you, but it was 2011, I was listening to President Obama speak to the families of the victims on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And it was incredibly moving, and he was incredibly compassionate. And he said to the families, he said, "You are not alone. No one is alone." He said those words. And I remember hearing that, and I thought, it's such an important message for today. And it's obviously sort of the main, to me, the main song in the piece, in Into the Woods. And I felt this might be the time for kids of today, families of today, to be able to hear that there is some hope in the world. And it was then that I called you and said, could we do this? Because I felt like, and I still feel, that kids today live in a much more unstable and fragile world than when I certainly grew up. And I feel like there needs to be something to hold on to, something for them to understand that it's okay when something happens disappointing, some loss. I mean, this movie has so many themes that's so beautiful about it. I don't think you set out to do that originally, James, sort of thematically one theme. But the theme of loss and how you move forward is the one that really struck me.
Talk about this notion of the woods, how you interpret this idea of the woods. How did you think about it, and how did you talk about it with James?
Well, the woods is so many things. It's the place you go into to learn, to get your wish, to grow, to change. It's fearful, it's seductive, it's all of those things, and it's life, So you go in and you learn and come out again a different person, and every character goes into the woods to get something. I love the desperation that everybody has and needs something so badly. And then once they have that, is it what they wanted? Cinderella's mother in the tree says that beautiful thing, "Are you certain what you wish is what you want?" And you think it is, but with Cinderella, for instance, she realizes maybe it's not where she's comfortable and where she should be. So it's, it really explores the woods as all of those things and it's a metaphor for life, really.
I'm curious, how far into the process were you trying to make that decision of, okay, this is where we want to go with something practical, have them on location, have them singing and dancing in the middle of a river, versus let's put it in a blue screen and we'll decide that later on a computer?
I think it's very important in this piece that you really care about these people. I mean, what I loved about these extraordinary actors is that they brought them to life with such vulnerability and strength and joy and fear and all of it, very human. And when I think of Meryl's witch, for instance, it's so dimensional in a way that I've never seen before, so vulnerable. You care so much for the witch. So that's important. And that reality and that being able to touch that was important for me too. And so to do that in a blue room or a green room, I don't think we would have found our world.
Among the strongest themes of Into the Woods is this relationship between parents and children. How do you think kids will respond to Into the Woods?
I think children of all ages, as they used to say, will respond to this because it's deep and joyful and scary and funny, thanks to Chris. And
his chest.
His chest. And his hair, really. The world is dark and full of joy, both. And they know that. They know that from the time they're very little. I was thinking about my son who used to draw monsters all the time, and I think, why doesn't he draw the lake and the island? It's so beautiful out there, and my garden, you know. And he was always drawing things that were terrifying because they have to get ready. They have to get ready in themselves. They know they have to be ready for the bad stuff, the big stuff. Stuff's going to come.
Share with us a little bit of the experience of shooting this movie. Tell us something about shooting on the set. Share a bit of an experience. So I can give you a chance to embarrass yourself or one of your fellow performers. And tell us about working with the kids, actually, as well, too.
Before you know it, you're in a room just talking to Meryl Streep like this is something that you do. And then she's amazing, and she sort of knows how you feel when you come in, when she walks in a room, and she does everything she can to go, we're a company. And she led this company from the front. And there is nothing you can say about her that hasn't been said as a performer, as an actor. It's incredible. But as a person, to meet someone who takes the work so seriously, is meticulous about the work, reading it, rereading it, doing it, is so serious about it as a piece, and yet takes herself not seriously one bit, makes the whole experience so much fun.
What was the funniest or most memorable moment on set, other than working with this guy?
Day 2, we were rehearsing in this mock-up bakery, the witch's entrance into the bakery and the witch's rap. And Meryl's doing this thing. She's got this dress, she's got this rehearsal dress on, and a cane, he's like a star, like a big walking stick thing. And we're just playing around with it, and she's doing, you know, the green, and she's jumping all over. She's
offensive,
like,
I'm sorry.
she's leaping on stuff and jumping up on things and coming up and getting in your face and all sorts of this. And she leaps up onto the table. Day 2, 11 a.m. Leaps, vaults, if you will, onto this table, catches her shoe in the dress, and starts to fall back, the table's this high, fall back head first towards this stone floor, and time slowed down, and I thought, I'm about to watch Meryl Streep die. It's happening. I wish I could say I didn't consider my own career in this and think this film's going to go down. Rob Marshall freezes and is going, oh my God, Meryl Streep's going to die. The person who stepped in and saved her life that day was not the 2 men in the room, was the pregnant woman. Leaps forward, catches Meryl Streep. Me and Rob are just like, I never forgot it really. And every day I would look and think, is she gonna really keep going for it at this level? And she really did. Yeah. Most times I think you only enjoy stuff on reflection. Right. You look back and go, God, we really had a great time there. I didn't realise. And every day, every single day on this, I thought, I don't want this to end, and I know that this has enriched me as a person, as a performer, and it was the single greatest time I've ever had on a film set.
Into the Woods explores the complexity of our own wishes and dreams, perhaps no more clearly seen than in the story of this woman who yearns to be a mom. What she'll do to become one, and then what happens in the wake of her suddenly getting that wish. I wonder if you might reflect on that a little bit.
I think maybe out of all of the characters, in a way, the baker's wife is morally the most questionable. And you sort of understand it because she is desperate, you know, just desperate to be a mother. And she's worked herself into a complete frenzy and distraction, that she cannot put one foot in front of the other until she becomes a mother. It's just that inability to see anything else other than the desire to be a mother. And she screws over all these poor fairy tale characters, you know. And she takes and takes and takes and does it with humor but she's very deliberate and is definitely the one who is prepared to go to any length out of the couple. She's the one who's prepared to go to any length in order to get what she wants. And she does that. And then I think what happens in the second act when she becomes a mother, which is so joyful and amazing, is that she has to suffer the ramifications of the morally questionable things that she's done. And ultimately, you know, the dalliance with the prince and all of that is, however, exciting, you know. And that song, Moments in the Woods, is a song of great conflict.
That's the only bit of the film which I think is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I had this with Rob, and I think, and I said to him, I think people will believe giants and witches, beanstalks, Johnny Depp's a wolf. No one, and you back me up, no one leaves this.
I think it's actually the tragedy of the character at the end is that once she's had this fling with the prince and is in great conflict about it and is debating what she did and she shouldn't have done it, but it was kind of amazing, but oh my God, I shouldn't have done it. And she realizes too late, and that's the tragedy. And I think a lot of people can relate to that regretful feeling that life offers you sometimes.
Anna, you've obviously sung roles on both on stage and in movies. Can you walk us through the differences in performing for the big screen versus the theater?
The challenge is always about if you're not going to sing live, if you are going to sing live, and you know, in this case, trying to find a balance that made sense for this movie of if I'm going to be running up and down the steps of the palace in a Colleen Atwood corset, it's going to have to be, you know, some of it's going to have to be pre-recorded, otherwise it's going to be real breathy. And in cases like that, it made sense because it, you know, Rob and I could kind of find the performance and craft the performance in the studio and make the decision of the emotional journey that she takes in the song, whereas something like He's a Very Nice Prince with Emily, you know, we're sitting on a rock having a conversation, and there was so much to discover that it didn't make sense to do it in the recording studio, and it, you know, we would have been locked into these performances and had no freedom to really look at each other and you know, be challenged by each other in that scene, and really go, no, I'm trying to make you understand, and I'm trying to make you understand. You know, we were lucky enough to get to do both in whatever situation made sense for that scene.
Did you know some of these songs already? Were some of them very familiar?
Well, that's the thing about Sondheim. You think you know.
Right.
You think you know. You're like, yeah, I know that song.
Did you have to unlearn and relearn it?
And then Paul Giammagnani plunks it out for you on piano, and you take a big gulp, and you sit down in front of your sheet music and your tape recorder, and you just torture yourself. And it's great.
I understand that you discovered this musical through this screen adaptation, Chris. Surely you know the essential stories of Cinderella, right, and Jack and the Beanstalk, but I'm curious to know what you responded to in this screenplay and how it makes these fairy tales that we all knew as kids, how it makes them so much more complex.
The most resonant thing to it, you know, I've heard a lot that in high schools they only perform the first act of the play, or oftentimes just the first act of the play, when things are nice and cozy and kind of what we know. And because in the second act, so much destruction and mayhem and life happens, you know, as much of what we know life to be. And I thought how interesting that, you know, and especially in Western cultures, things like death and pain and sorrow and all these things that we consider to be ugly and that we don't want to look at or verboten or kind of pushed aside, yet they are a part of the cycle of life, you know? And I think that there's a beautiful thing, something beautiful about incorporating that into the story that we tell each other, that these things do happen, and to invite children into what it means to be an adult human being, or just to be a human being, which is, there is much joy and there's much laughter, but there's also much pain and much sorrow, but there will always be hope. There's always the choice to, you can always choose to hope. And I think that there's something beautiful about that. And as for my character, I loved his two-dimensionality, and his just utter fascination with himself. And I told Rob I would probably would have done, I would have done, just the opportunity to work with everybody is so fantastic, but there's a moment before Agony when me and Leatherpants are walking through the woods, and we get to the stream, and Billy says, well, no maiden would run from us. And I think, well, yet one has. And there's a camera somewhere far off to my left, and the prince looks at the camera, and I'm like, I just love the idea that he knows that somewhere out there, someone is watching him sing. So for all these wonderful people doing all these complex and really kind of in-depth psychological studies, my character is not that. But there is that wonderful moment at the end where Cinderella kind of forces him to look at himself and to look at the effect that he may be having on other people, that he is hurting people by this determined drive to love all things at once. And she gets him to feel this very two-dimensional character taken from the pages of the storybook. And, I like that.
The role of the quote-unquote wicked stepmother is certainly such an iconic character type in stories, right? So I'm wondering what your take on this role of James Lapine and Stephen Sondheim's stepmother, and what did you aim to bring to it, having knowledge of how it looked and felt in the theater, and being asked to inhabit this character?
The energy of those characters, particularly the mother, is in, status and money and image. And in that regard, I think she's very contemporary sensibility, the worst of our contemporary sensibility.
Don't miss your favorite movie reviews and interviews. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and be sure to like and comment about this excerpt. Enjoy.